Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today, I will be interviewing a ZES for Zumba as well as an EMT, and she's the same person. I will be interviewing Barb Klontz. Let's get started.
Hi.
Who or what inspired you to pursue a career in STEM?
That's an excellent question. My parents, actually, my dad is an archaeologist and my mom is what used to be called a palynologist. Now they call it an archaeobotanist. She has a degree in archaeology. She has a PhD in botany, and she studies pollen and other material records from our past to discover what we ate, what was processed, what plants were cultivated, and what grew wild. She owns her own lab. She's owned it since before I was born. The day I was born, she worked in her lab until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I've worked in her office and laboratory since I was 11. And it was sort of like I didn't have a choice. It was just genetics.
What is an obstacle that you encountered in STEM and how did you overcome it?
A big obstacle for me, when I was really, really young, I had an aptitude in math and I did really well. I was very accelerated. And then I got a teacher who was very frustrated that I could do math in my head. And she made me draw the counting of the numbers out on the page. And then when I still just could get my work done fast, she would pull me up in front of the room and make me say to everybody in the room how I thought I was smarter than they were, and I was arrogant, and I had a big ego because I didn't do math the same way that they did, and I insisted on doing it myself. And it got so bad that I then started to shake when I went to math class, and it took me until out of college to get to the place where I could do math without having a panic attack. So it really then affected my abilities in chemistry and physics, and it really became an obstacle that I had to overcome.
Wow. I couldn't imagine a teacher doing that. That must have been horrible. I apologize that they had to experience that.
Yeah, it was hard, but I think some of those hard things lead us to other things in our lives. I love to teach, and I'm a very compassionate teacher. And I also understand that people do things in their own ways. And I think that sort of shaped me so that I'm a better person now because I had that experience then. And also, I just had to redo some of my math credits for a new program I'm applying to. And I got 99% in my statistics class. So, once you get over it, once you master it, then the accomplishments are so much greater because you couldn't do that 20 years ago or 15 or 5 years ago. So it's so much sweeter now because I know that I've overcome it.
What is a strength that you have found being a woman in STEM?
That is a really good question. As a woman in STEM, you stand out. There are more women in STEM now, but we're still not the majority. And so what I found is the men are competing with each other, but the women tend to be in a class of their own. And sometimes we're discriminated against, but mostly the people I've run into are happy to have us in the field. And so we get a lot of support and there's a little less competition for us. So it means that if you really want to be there, you can flourish.
What advice do you have for young women interested in pursuing a STEM career?
It's probably the easiest thing to say and the hardest thing to do. And that is not to take on anyone else's goals or judgments, to follow your passion. You may want to do one thing and discover that you're way better, more excited about something else once you get into it. So even though you may think you know your path, you should be open to possibilities, but then also don't take on people's judgments of yourself. When someone judges you, it has more to do with how they see themselves in the world than it has to do about your impact on them. And that's just a hard thing to learn, and it's a hard thing to practice. It comes with time.
What do you see for the future of women in STEM?
I think it's completely unlimited. I just did a clinical in epidemiology, and in my clinical, there was, in the world of epidemiologists, professional PhD or MDs that were working with us, there was one man and everyone else was a woman. So there's a lot of space for us. And I think the delineation between you're in STEM or you're a woman in STEM is starting to blur a little bit. And so if we just keep our presence up and keep participating, it's just going to become normal. We're all just going to be STEM professionals and not a woman in STEM necessarily. Will become normal.
Yeah. And finally, so you're in STEM, you're also in Zumba. How have the two impacted each other in your life?
That's a great question. So when I started with Zumba, it was at the beginning of the company. And so there were 15 of us who were doing trainings around the world. And of that group of 15, 5 of us had fitness experience and a science background, and 10 had a dance background. And so learning to interact with each other was fascinating, right? Dancers relate to each other at a different level than scientists do, and vice versa. What we learned was that we had different talents and different strengths, and then we would work together. So one of the dancers called me up. She was teaching a class and she had to do some anatomy and physiology. And so she asked me to join her, and then we would teach together. So she would teach the students, but then I'd also be learning about dance and technique. And then I would teach, but then she was learning about anatomy. And then we would branch off and teach on our own. So in fitness or in dance or in any of these fields, like if you look at sports, you think definitely science is involved. When we get into the world of group exercise and dance, we sometimes forget that it's a sport that involves all of the science that football or track or any of these other Olympic sports or professional sports do. And at the same time, those of us who are in science and STEM, it's important not to discount the experience of the dancers or the non-science people in our lives, because they're incredibly smart. It's just in a different area. And so what I've learned in Zumba is to value the non-scientific opinion, experience, and advice, because it comes from a world where I don't spend much time and I need a lot of guidance and support. And so I try to learn as much from them as I can bring to the table as a team.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.